You are entering the Nihiliverse with your hosts Gustavo Candia and Rodney Perry. This episode has been brought to you by the Society of Namecoin. No. This week was the subsection was entitled "Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid."
Be afraid, be very afraid, yeah.
Okay, what are we supposed to be afraid of?
Well, first of all, I should note that just in thinking about nothing, we are joining a very august group of people who, over the last 2,500 years, have tried to think about nothing, approach nothing, and it's been filled with great thinkers, and so we are joining them, I guess, in a modest way anyway. But one of the things that we noticed when we started to look at the history of nothing was that there has been a palpable fear associated with looking at the various masks, like say the masks of nothing. So nothing has been approached in a variety of languages over that time, that 2,500 years. They've talked about a vacuum, about zero, about infinity, and more recently language of maybe dark energy or things like that. And so there's been these various masks that I call it, that people have looked at on nothing and in the last in a period of time. And so today we'll just talk about, from what I can understand, today we'll just talk about sort of Western scientists who have looked at nothing. We have many hundreds of pages of book to go through where we'll talk about religions and we'll talk about Eastern notions and so forth. But today it's mainly about science. And one of the things that I saw, especially when we were writing the book, is that as readers, we need a narrative approach. We need a pathway. We need a way of talking about nothing, because in talking about nothing, it's very easy to come quickly to a place where you don't have much more to say. Mm-hmm. And so what I found in doing research, and this is new to me, and my background is in Eastern philosophy and religion, but the studying science, what I found is that the theme of fear, it comes up constantly in thinking about nothing. So, like for instance, I found this one really interesting historical note that, like in the 13th century, the city of Florence banned zero. They banned the usage of zero because Right. It's so potent to add a little zero onto the end of number and get this this quantifiable what would you call it, increase, that they thought it was too dangerous to use, and so they outlawed the use of zero, which I thought was a great So anyway, it all starts in the West. We usually think of Aristotle when we think of nothing, and Aristotle had a palpable fear of the empty, the void, the infinite, and I was looking at a book by Brian Rotman called "Signifying Nothing," and he said that the notion of an unclassifiable emptiness to Aristotle was so strong that he called it a horror vacui.
Right. He wasn't it Aristotle that abhorred the vacuum, that first sort of
yes,
in Latin abhorred vacuum, right? Yeah.
Abhorred the vacuum. I mean, but that's quite a strong notion, and it struck me that an interesting way to introduce the history of nothing is to look at the fearful quality that people had in approaching it. So Aristotle, of course, said that the infinity, for instance, cannot exist, and the word that he used for infinity was apeiron, and apeiron had all the connotations of kind of like unbridled, undefinable, unbridled, like the word that we have for chaos. In a certain sense, apeiron meant like chaos for Aristotle. So another thing that I noticed in looking through in the history was that if you look at just the titles of books and articles and speeches, lectures about nothing, you find all kinds of words like avoiding, mysterious, terrifying. They sort of go together. So that notion that approaching nothing is a fearful thing to do. Thinking about nothing brings about fear is something that has been throughout the literature. And so mainly why I wanted to bring that up right now, other than the fact that it's a great narrative pathway for talking about nothing. It lets you talk about the scientist, but gives you a really easy handle for talking about the scientist. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up is that nihilology is a vehicle for approaching nothing. Nihilology
so that we don't have to fear nothing.
You don't have to fear nothing. Right?
Okay.
So nihilology provides a structure and a very intellectually grounded and definition-rich way of approaching nothing. So I'm just that was just a little a way of saying how nihilology can both guide people using the narrative of fear, and it also can serve to let readers approach something that is inherently fearful.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's just the one way of thinking about what nihilology is and how it approaches this history.
Right. We're prepping our listeners and our readers, right, to sort of be open to sort of accepting what sort of follows in the pages of the book. And sticking with the history of science, we mentioned we speak of Kepler, and like Rutherford. I think a couple of weeks ago I mentioned how he possibly, indirectly, sort of presented the first model of the void. Kepler might have indirectly sort of been responsible for presenting the first model of a finite universe.
Right.
And because he abhorred in this case, the infinite universe, even though up until the 1920s, with the discovery made by Hubble, the prevalent thought about the universe was that an infinite universe, right? So, so that was the common idea up until 1920s, that the universe was an infinite in its expanse, right?
Yeah.
But Kepler didn't want to believe that, right? He actually made his universe a finite universe, and in so doing, actually, by bounding the universe, demarcated between something and nothing, right? So, in a way, by trying to eliminate infinity from his universe, he introduced an infinity, but one that he just could let go of and thought, right? The infinity that he created was that what I have termed the Nihiliverse, right? We're all comfortable with the idea of a universe, right? Everything that is, and maybe even the multiverse, which is a popular pseudo-scientific theory of today, right? But the Nihiliverse is everything, is the space of nothing, right? So if the universe is finite, right, we can imagine the beyond that somethingness is nothing, right? And that space of nothing is the Nihiliverse. Okay. Right. So so that's one way that you can sort of think of it, right? That if the universe is the bounds of the natural world, or everything that science can speak to, or science can experimentally test, right? Then the Nihiliverse is beyond all that is.
Right.
Okay. But then you could say, well, just like I mentioned, the multiverse, right? Well, now scientists and others like to imagine, well, that coupled to the idea with quantum mechanics about there being sort of an infinite number of universes, right? And the collection of universes being the multiverse, and that is what I think to be the new universe of scientists. If there is a way for science, right, or for us to as scientists to communicate to other universes, to experimentally verify that they're there in some way, right, sending some signal, whether light or gravity waves or something else to be determined,
Right.
there's a way of communicating with these other universes, right, then they are in the purview of science, correctly, right? And so the multiverse would be the new universe, right? Capital U universe, and the universe that we inhabit now is some sort of lowercase universe,
Right.
right?
Right.
So then, if the multiverse then, right, is the new universe, then the Nihiliverse at that stage would be considered beyond the bounds of the multiverse, but potentially also, right, the space in between universes, right, the lowercase universes like our own.
Right.
Actually, it stands to reason that universes would be separated by some space, some maybe 11th dimensional space or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And just like the nucleus of the atom and the electrons, and then there's some space in between, right, which without an ether, right, there would it stand to reason that there's in some ways a void there, right? There would have to be a space or a void between universes, right, for them to be distinct.
That's right.
Right? Kind of like the Pauli exclusion principle, right? They're requiring different quantum numbers, right, to signify different electrons, right? Different universes would have to have different, like, whatever numbers, right? Space numbers, right? So the Nihiliverse will always exist beyond what we can imagine, right?
Yeah.
And I believe as sort of, but is this the right way of what do we do with this lowercase universe, like lowercase universe and uppercase universe? What is it? I remember Kant and him looking up into the sky with the telescope, and having seen the Andromeda galaxy, didn't label it. He wasn't the one that named it the Andromeda galaxy. In fact, for the 18th century natural philosopher, right, it was an island universe, not a Andromeda galaxy or just galaxy. So why? Well, because from Kant's perspective, right, it looked like something like the Milky Way, but just you could tell it was at a great distance from it. So he could only imagine it to be another universe. Right. And yet, we don't call the Andromeda galaxy the Andromeda universe. As time went on, scientists and philosophers got together and they decided it's better to create a new category for this cosmological entity than it is to carry and reserve the term universe for all that there is.
For all that there is.
Okay. Right. So let's be consistent, right? And if we are to discover new universes, right, what we would, new lowercase universes, if we're to remain consistent with the history of science, we would rename those parallel universes. Wouldn't no longer exist. It wouldn't be parallel universes. They would be parallel, whatever term you want to create there.
Galaverse, yeah.
Galaverse, a Galaverse, right? So we live in one Galaverse, and you know, us not doing this podcast is another Galaverse, right? So that's how it works. And the term multiverse is something that we're using just in the interim, right? But once Galaverses are discovered, right, then the universe would now shift to the multiverse, right? So the collection of universes or the collection of Galaverses, right, would be the new universe.
The new universe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we retain that which defines the universe, and that is the bounds of everything that is. Right? Everything that can be experimentally tested or within the purview of science. Right? So everybody should be happy here. Science gets a larger domain of inquiry, right? And metaphysicians and theologians still have a space beyond.
Yeah.
Isn't that that's a good compromise, right?
I think it's a good one. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, the Nihiliverse is the space beyond everything that is. Right? If nothingness is the element, yeah, the Nihiliverse is the space of nothingness, right? That beyond that is, and in the space between Galaverses or universe, the lowercase universes, that is also part of the Nihiliverse, as we sort of imagine it. So so there you go. There's another way that we can introduce this neological term, right? Neology, to I guess maybe better understand, right, our science. Not because I've done any testing or anything, right? This is just something that I just came up with in my head, right? But a way of distinguishing between what is and what isn't, right? It's helpful, right? And a way of distinguishing between what is in the purview of science and what isn't, right, will help us to move forward as scientists, as theologians and philosophers and so on. So, so yeah, the Nihiliverse is a term that we're introducing to you to help you distinguish between what is and what isn't.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, I mean, that's good. A lot of the literature about nothing that we've run into over the last years of research and so forth is difficult because it's amorphous and airy and so forth. And I think one of the positive aspects of what we're doing with nihilology is it doesn't have an airy, amorphous feel to it. It has a very attractive and almost concrete feel to it.
I was going to use the exact same word. That's the exact word that I would use. Yeah, it's concrete.
Nihiliverse is really nice. Is another way of talking like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things later on in the book we talk about the various continuums, and we've used this phrase over the cliff edge, and over the cliff edge is where nothing lies. And we've approached that cliff edge through a whole variety of continuums: materiality, rationality, the divine, size, speed, and so forth. And what we have found in approaching it on these various continuums is that nothing lies off the end of all those continuums. All those continuums. And the one that you're looking at today was really off the end of the continuum of materiality, right? Off the end of everything lies nothing. And I think that's another interpretive handle that we're giving people is the lying off the end of all the continuums. Regardless of which continuum you're looking at, you'll find nothing lies off the end. And I think that's a great handle, and it's a great very powerful way of understanding for readers.
Right.
And for us, I mean, the thing is, I don't know if you have this, Gustavo, but I often fear being asked about. I don't want to overuse that word fear. I often quake at the prospect of being questioned about nothing, because there's a sense of, oh, I have nothing to say. There's nothing to say here. There's no words and so forth. And so what I immediately do is I go to our pathways, our handles, our conceptual tools, and those conceptual tools allow me to speak. But that kind of, oh God, what's the kind of thing constantly comes up. And I think we're helping readers who will, if they do read our book and listen to our podcasts and listen to what you just said about the Nihiliverse and so forth, they will have tools with which to approach and enter into conversations about it.
I'll tell you the truth. I mean, I feel something similar, though I kind of just allow myself to go with it. So sometimes I'll use the word nothing, and I'll just be like, that's not right. Like I catch myself after having said it, and I just don't want to correct myself because it just feels it'll disrupt the flow, right? Of speaking, right? And it might confuse the person on the other end, on the other side, right? That I'm not being consistent with where I should be saying a nothingness, right? I'm using nothing.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, so that's something that I fight with myself. But I feel like, just like we're reading the book again. I feel that by the more exposure that I have to this type of conversation, the more I will keep myself in check, right? The less I will confuse, right, the terms in my own head, right, and utter those words when they're not sort of appropriate, right. The more I will stop myself from using nothing unless I'm using it as a declarative, and the more I will use the word nothingness, or not anything at all, or nothing of note. Taxonomy of nothing that we spoke of in last episode. So I think that it's just having more practice with it, right? Hey, listen, we're neophytes. We wrote a book, right? So we're maybe a little bit further along than others, right? But we're going to make mistakes too, and what we want is for other people to call us out on it, right? Catch us in our own inconsistencies, right? Help us correct our terminology, so that we can when we communicate, right? There won't be any ambiguity about what we mean, right? That's the goal, I guess. If I were to speak to a popularizer of science, I don't see how a person could object to that, right? We want to clarify what it is that we mean when we say something. So
so in writing, I find that in writing the book together, we learned a lot, and we're passing on a lot. But in our speaking in the podcast, it's a whole new level of understanding for us as well, not just the people who are listening to the podcast. So it's a great opportunity for me anyway to learn more.
Yeah. All right. So I think we'll leave it at that, and I guess we'll see you next week.
Okay. Take care.
Entering the Nihiliverse has been brought to you by the Society of Namecoin. Until next time. No.